Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. In this video, we will discuss the minimum criteria required for Republicans to win an election. We will also look at historical results to confirm the validity of this criteria. So let's get started. Now, most astrologers assess the chart of the presidential candidates in order to determine whether they will win the election. However, elections are not about candidates, they are about the way of life of the people. The people decide the way of life they want for the next 4 years, and this decision comes from the planetary energies at the time of the election. This criteria shows us whether the planetary energies are influencing people into choosing a more conservative way of life. Following extensive analysis of election victories, from Abraham Lincoln's victory in 1864 to Joe Biden's victory in 2020, I have determined the 8 minimum criteria that are required for Republicans to win a presidential election. Now let's look at the first criteria. Jupiter must not be in Sagittarius unless it is with Mars. The reason behind this is that Sagittarius is Jupiter's own house. When Jupiter enters Sagittarius, it goes to sleep. Now, because Jupiter is a conservative planet, what happens when Jupiter is in Sagittarius is that many conservatives fail to go to the polling booths to cast their vote. The second criteria is that Mercury must not be ahead of the Sun in the same house. And if Mercury is retrograde, it certainly helps the Republicans. Now, Sun is always in Libra at the time of the election. And this is because the elections are always held between 2nd and the 8th of November. Unfortunately, this position of Sun is not favorable to the Republicans because when Sun is in Libra, people do not like government. People want freedom from the government. So when Mercury is ahead of the Sun in the same house, the Sun is able to influence Mercury and reduce its own energy. As a result, Mercury is not able to function properly. The third criteria is that Mercury must not be in the same house as Venus unless it is behind Venus in Scorpio. And here Venus in Sagittarius helps. The reason behind this is that if Mercury is in the same house as Venus and ahead of it, then again Venus is going to influence Mercury and reduce its ability. Now, as we discussed in criteria number 1 that Jupiter must not be in Sagittarius, the opposite happens when Venus is in Sagittarius. Now, looking back at historical results, every time Venus was in Sagittarius on election day, the Republicans won the election. Now, this is not a minimum criteria, so Republicans have also won the election when Venus was not in Sagittarius. However, this position certainly seems to help Republicans. The fourth criteria is that Saturn must not be behind the Sun in the same house. The reason behind this is that Saturn represents the general public, and if Saturn is behind the Sun, then the general public are able to influence the Sun and get away with what they want. And as we know that Republicans are conservative in nature, people generally do not prefer to have a conservative government. The fifth criteria is that Saturn must not aspect the Sun. Now, when Saturn aspects the Sun, it is the same as if Saturn were behind the Sun. And hence, if Saturn aspects the Sun, Democrats win the election. The sixth criteria is that Ketu must not be at higher degree than Sun in the same house. Now, Ketu travels in the opposite direction. Hence, if it is at a higher degree than the Sun, it means it is traveling towards the Sun. And when it is traveling towards the Sun, it takes away the energy of the Sun. And hence, when Sun loses its energy, Republicans lose the election. The seventh criteria is that Mars must not be ahead of the Sun in the same house. Now, when Mars is ahead of the Sun in the same house, the Sun influences Mars and Mars loses its ability to perform well. Mars is associated with energizing the public. Republicans are usually energized. The last criteria is that Mars must not be debilitated unless Rahu is in the same sign at a higher degree than Mars, and exalted Mars helps. The reason why Mars must not be debilitated is that if Mars is debilitated, it loses its energy and is similar to the previous criteria where Mars being ahead of the Sun also results in it becoming weak. Now, if Rahu is in the same sign and at a higher degree than Mars, because Rahu travels in the opposite direction, when Rahu looks at Mars, it will influence Mars and amplify its energy. Hence, when Rahu is in the same sign at a higher degree than Mars, Mars gains energy and as a result, Republicans win the election. Exalted Mars is not a required criteria, but when Mars is exalted, it is energetic and supports Republicans in the election. Now that we have discussed the minimum criteria required for Republicans to win the presidential election, let's take a look at historical results to validate this criteria. So here is a table containing historical results confirming the validity of the criteria discussed earlier. So we have the election date, the winning party, the winning candidate, and whether the winning criteria has been met. Now here I have displayed the last 20 elections, and as we can see, every time all 8 criteria were met, Republicans won the election. So in this video, we discussed the minimum criteria required for Republicans to win the presidential election. We also applied this criteria to historical results to confirm the validity of this criteria. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you.